Four men walk across the ice toward an island barely visible on the white horizon. They never arrive. Their bodies will be found years later, frozen on the wrong island. It's January 1914, somewhere in the Arctic Ocean, north of Siberia, and those four won't be the only ones. Before this story ends, 11 people will be dead. A ship will rest at the bottom of a frozen sea, and one question will remain that no one has answered in over a century. Was one of those deaths a suicide or a murder? But let's start at the beginning, and with the man who, many say, left his crew to their fate. The Canadian Arctic expedition was organized under the leadership of Canadian anthropologist Vilhjalmur Stefansson, with both scientific and geographic aims. Its goal was to find a continent north of the Canadian archipelago. Stefansson was ambitious, famous, and convinced that a prepared explorer could live off the frozen land, just as the Inuit did. For the mission, he chose an old ship. The expedition set out aboard the Karluk, a retired wooden whaling vessel, in August 1913. It was built to hunt whales in open water, not to withstand the crushing pressure of Arctic ice. That detail would prove fatal. The crew wasn't ideal either. Stefansson gathered a group of international scientists, only two of whom had any prior polar experience. Most of the crew were young, inexperienced men chasing adventure. But there was one exception: the captain. After returning from the spring 1913 seal hunt, Bartlett received a telegram from Stefansson asking him to command the Karluk. Robert Bartlett was a Newfoundland sea dog, a real polar explorer, and that difference between him and almost everyone else would decide who lived and who died. The plan was simple on paper. The Karluk was to sail along northern Alaska before meeting another ship, the Alaska, at Herschel Island. But the Arctic doesn't care about plans. In August 1913, the Karluk became trapped in the ice while sailing toward the rendezvous at Herschel Island. The ship couldn't move. And this is where the story turns dark forever. With the ship locked in, Stefansson made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Shortly after the Karluk was trapped, Stefansson left the ship with a small party, claiming he intended to hunt caribou. He took some of his best men and dogs with him. He never came back. Just 2 days after his departure, on September 20th, strong winds drove the Karluk rapidly westward, making it impossible for Stefansson and his team to ever find the ship again. Was it bad luck? Or an excuse to abandon a doomed vessel? Historians have argued about it for a century. Historians remain divided over Stefansson's decision to leave the ship. What's certain is that, while he went on exploring new lands, 25 people were left adrift on the ice. At their head, Captain Bartlett. For months, the Karluk was dragged along like a toy. After a long drift through the Beaufort and Chukchi seas, in January 1914, the ship was crushed and sank. The day it sank has a detail that sounds like something from a film. According to accounts, on January 10th, the ice began to crush the hull, and the next afternoon Bartlett played Chopin's Funeral March on a gramophone, stepping off the sinking ship moments before it vanished beneath the ice. A funeral for a vessel, with music playing over the white wasteland. But Bartlett had seen the disaster coming. He had prepared supplies and shelters out on the ice. All 25 people aboard, crew, expedition staff, and Inuit hunters, moved onto the ice. Now they were alone. No ship. Dozens of kilometers from the nearest land, in the depth of the polar night, with temperatures that could kill a man in hours. Bartlett's plan was to wait for the light to return, then march south toward Wrangel Island. 4 men in the group, however, disagreed with Bartlett's plan and decided to head south on their own. At their request, Bartlett equipped them with a sled, dogs, and enough supplies for 50 days. They were the first to disappear. And here we return to the image from the beginning. An advance party of 4 men was lost during the march and found dead on Herald Island years later. They had reached the wrong island, a frozen rock kilometers from their target, where they died waiting for a rescue that never knew they were there. Another group of 4 was also lost on the ice. 2 parties of 4 men vanished before reaching the island. The rest pushed on. Under Bartlett's guidance, the survivors built a camp on the ice, endured the long Arctic night, and traveled overland until they reached solid ground. It was a brutal march through pressure ridges, cracks, and blizzards. When they finally set foot on Wrangel Island, Bartlett knew they would all die there if help didn't come. And no one in the world knew they were alive. So he made the boldest decision in the entire story. From the island, Bartlett and an Inuk companion, Kataktovik, set out across the frozen sea toward the coast of Siberia in search of help. Two men, on foot, crossing a frozen ocean. Bartlett and Kataktovik reached the mainland on April 8th, finally making their way to Emmatown on April 24th. From there, Bartlett went on alone. Kataktovik stayed in Emmatown while Bartlett pressed forward, finally reaching Nome on May 27th. In all, a journey of more than 1,000 kilometers over ice and land. He had done the impossible, he had raised the alarm, but the Arctic wasn't finished. Aided by the local people, the pair reached Alaska, but the sea ice conditions made any immediate rescue impossible. The sea was still closed, and meanwhile, on Wrangel, the people waited. And here is the mystery that remains unsolved. On the island, hunger and fear did their work. On Wrangel Island, the stranded group survived by hunting, but they were short on food and torn apart by internal disputes. There were fights over food, tobacco and ammunition, and one death by gunshot. It was never determined whether it was suicide or murder. One man died from a gunshot. On a tiny island, cut off from the world, surrounded by people pushed to the edge of survival. Did despair take his life, or did someone pull the trigger? More than 100 years later, we still don't know. Before the rescue, the situation grew worse. Before their final rescue in September 1914, 3 more of the group had died, 2 from illness and 1 under violent circumstances. At last, the sea gave way. The King and Wing reached Wrangel Island on September 7th, rescuing 14 survivors. 9 months after the sinking, a schooner found a pitiful handful of Karluk survivors suffering from starvation, snow blindness, exposure, and even amputations. The final toll was devastating. 11 of the 25 survivors died before the rescue from Wrangel Island on September 7, 1914. And here comes the shattering of the myth. We tend to imagine the captain as the one who goes down with his ship, and the scientists and explorers as the heroes. But in this story, the man who organized everything, Stephenson, survived by exploring far from the disaster, while it was the captain, Bartlett, who walked 1,000 kilometers to save those who were left. Though hailed as Canada's greatest Arctic explorer, Stephenson has also been harshly criticized for abandoning the Karluk. And there's one last detail that gives this tragedy an unexpected human face. Aboard the Karluk traveled an Inuit family with 2 little girls. The 2 girls, according to Palsson, provided important sources of joy in the darkest moments. One of them, the youngest, was only 3 years old when the ship went down. Mugpi, later known as Ruth Makpai Ipaluk, was the last survivor of the Karluk voyage. She died in 2008 at the age of 97, after a full life. A little girl who survived the worst Arctic disaster since Franklin, and who lived nearly a whole century to tell it, while 4 men remain, in a sense, lost on the ice, on the wrong island.